were saying many words.
Who said that?
Yeah, people. I love so many people. Listen to Stern.
What's up with it, bro?
Tuesday, 1987. Highlight program. Mason and I are
Got
out
out
of school.
so fast.
What is?
One of
You can
y'all.
just keep it either you're in the back or
There's a seat right there. You can scoot over too. If you want that much.
There's a seat right there.
Behind him.
This one?
Yeah.
No, please. I'm just kidding, Michael. I'm on your side of this.
You'd rather sit next to Daniel and Andrew.
I'm just not the one complaining, so I shouldn't have to move.
I just don't want to be tongue kissing Daniel, that's all.
Well, then
Why
move
would
to
you
the
go
other
back
seat.
You said what?
Then just move to the other seat.
I mean, I was here first. Daniel, get in the back, bro.
I didn't realize we were going back to 7th grade. I just,
Oh, man.
just remind me now there's a hot mic. Ooh, a hot mic on top of y'all,
I
so
peak
chill
close to
out.
7th grade, so you'll have to go back.
There's a hot mic.
There's a hot mic.
2
Okay,
years of
appreciate it.
outside left in
And
7th
we're
grade.
streaming.
Thanks, Steve.
What's that? I'm up.
It's not a live stream, it's not a question. Don't wait.
They're very strange.
No, yes.
It's a good design. My heart's hammering. That might be the sun calico. I'm not sure if it's
Alright, buddy.
my pitch.
Good morning. It's really great to have everybody with us today as we close out the 16th season of Thunder basketball and look forward to the 17th. Want to just start with a few thank yous. Just want to thank all of our fans from around the world, in the city, in the community, all of our partners, people that are involved with the team, engaged with the team, support the team. Everybody in basketball operations that gives up so much time in their personal lives to be a part of what it is that we're doing on a day in and day out basis. And again, just a special thanks to the community and the relationship that we have with them, as well as everybody in the room, the media, everybody that tells our story to the team, to the fans on a daily basis, and has done that for so long. It's such a big part of what it is that we do, so we're super grateful for that. I also just wanted to take a second to recognize, I was thinking about Bob Berry Jr. recently, and it will be 9 years in June that we lost him. He was obviously a huge factor in the community, a huge member of the media. I think it's important that we continue to keep his memory alive. He was a great supporter of the team, had a great energy about him. So never want to lose an opportunity to reflect on the people that have been a big part of our journey. So want to make sure we do that. with that, open up with any questions you guys have.
Sam, you've had some great players here over the course of time, some Hall of Fame level players here over the 16 years, and you've got this kind of new group of players now, some of those guys who are really tracking towards having incredible careers. I just wonder, what you think these guys have maybe in common or different from some of the other high-level players you've had here over time.
We've been super blessed with a lot of different elite players in a short amount of time, and we're always grateful for that. In my experience so far, the thing that I have tried to really study and try to learn as much as I can is, what makes and separates these elite guys, because I think it's more their differences than their commonalities. Obviously, you can't get to that status unless, you're a hard worker, you take your profession seriously. I mean, there's some just baseline things. But each one of them that I've had the ability to be around and observe, has something about them that is like a point of difference. And I've really tried to understand why they're in it, why they're doing it, how to try to support their goals and the potential that they're trying to recognize, regardless of where they are in their career. And it's been a big learning experience for me personally. The one thing that I do think is a big differentiator, I guess you could call it a commonality, but the best players are the secure players. The best players are the secure players, the players that can see clearly their own limitations, and not just the limitations of their teammates or their opponents, but also that clarity and security allows them to see the things that they can do and work toward to improve, and I really think that's a big one, especially in today's day and age. Obviously with Shai, because he's most present in my mind, I think he's a secure player. I think that he is able to see himself clearly and isn't always looking at the shortcomings of others. He's not burning a lot of emotion on that. He's burning his emotion on how to improve and not always looking outwardly, because I think he's confident. And I think that's a sign of a you have to be pretty confident and have blinders like that if you're going to be performing night in and night out at that level.
Use the metaphor about you don't buy paint for a house before you actually buy the house in relation to not knowing what the team might need before it sort of reveals itself. In this first go around in the playoffs, what revealed itself as far as needs?
Well, when I said that, I think the thing you have to think about there is it's not just a matter of knowing what you need. It's really a matter of knowing what you have, right? It's not a matter of knowing what you need. It's a matter of knowing what you have. That's as important as anything. And I think one of the things that we learned is we have a really good base to work with. If we went down the path a more performative, outside acquisition like a lot of people were asking for, I don't think we'd know nearly as much about the team. I remember saying, and everybody wanted us to cobble together our draft tools and add a star. And the question I asked was, are we sure we don't have some players amongst us that could potentially walk in those shoes at some point? And if we were to be trying to accelerate something that maybe is best organically, could we be suppressing that potential? And I think we learned that we do have some guys in Chet and Jalen that are certainly not there yet, but I wouldn't bet against them. I think the other thing that we learned is that we're we're kind of a one-of-one situation, Joe, because we still have so much more to do, and we have a lot to learn, and we have a lot of experiences we need to gather and go through. But we can't take away the fact that this was the youngest team in history to win a playoff series, win a division, finish first in the conference. And the Western Conference was not for the faint of heart. It never is, but certainly an accomplishment in that right. And so I think we learned that we are like historic in that sense. Now that doesn't promise us anything next year. And I think it's naturally easy to pin our limitations and our shortcomings, on things that maybe another team that's more conventional or more traditional may have. But I think it's important to note that, we also haven't been at it as long as some of those teams too. So I think we learned quite a bit. I also think it's important to recognize we lost 58 games 2 years ago and we won 57 this year. So I'm not surprised that we're not like a complete or perfect team. I mean, no team is, but certainly not going to be a complete and perfect team in a 2-year window like that. We didn't mortgage our future to get that result. We also we didn't do anything like performative to accelerate that process. So I think we learned that we have a good start and we have a really good base. It's hard to compare us to or run the NBA tropes out there because there's not a lot of examples of teams like this. That makes it, I guess it could make it more difficult for that reason. But I'm glad we took the path that we did. Ultimately, we trusted the team.
You alluded to, some of the noise at the trade deadline. Why didn't they do more? Stuff like that, be more aggressive. Like, how did you guys approach the trade deadline? And did the team being, it's standing at or near the top of the West, how did that kind of impact your thinking there?
Well, I wasn't referring to the trade deadline. I'm happy to answer the question, but but I was referring to the beginning of the season when I don't think people were really clamoring for that at the trade deadline. There was more at the beginning of the year. Trade deadline, the one thing that we have to look at is where we were and where we finished. After the trade deadline, we were in first place. And after the regular season concluded, we ended up in first place. The team really surged after that. And I think a big part of it is we didn't manipulate it to a huge degree. Obviously, we made the trade for Gordon, and you guys can ask me about that separately if you want. I'm happy to talk about that. I just don't want to get diverted with this particular question. But and that trade is like a multi-dimensional trade for us, right? You're consolidating, 3 players who ultimately, would like to play more. You're clearing up a significant amount of future salary, and you're bringing a player in who you think very highly of, who you don't, who seemingly fits the style in which you play. I do think it's real that particular period was very instructive because I think it's a good learning opportunity for us that this particular team or iteration of the team could be really challenging to add to in the middle of the season. And we were trying to be as delicate as we could. Now, I like how it ended because we obviously were significantly better at the end of the year than we were at the deadline. And we certainly, if we did something else, I don't know that it would have taken away from the formula that we had kind of found for the year. Even the rebounding, which I know is a question that we'll talk about. After the trade deadline, we were the 10th best defensive rebounding team in the league. Now, I'm not saying that was because of the trade deadline. I think it was probably a factor of a lot of different factors. But by kind of continuing to trust the team, at the end of the day, that's what I felt we did. We finished with the best record, the first division. We certainly could have done some things different. If we did, I don't know that it could have been better. It could have been worse. I don't know. It just would have been different. But I do think it's instructive just with our play style, and when you have a good thing moving, manipulating that doesn't mean it always gets better. It could obviously get worse. I think we tried to thread the needle, and I'm pleased with the way, where we ended,
Yeah, just one quick follow-up, sorry. You mentioned this particular team might be difficult to add to. Is that because of play style?
Well, I think for sure. I think play style is the first thing, because of the way we play, the continuity that we're establishing. This particular year, we were the second best or third best net rating team in the league at that point in time. And you have to remember where we started, like just for context. Like at the beginning of the season, there were people that didn't think we were serious that we were going to play Chet at the 5. So Chet hadn't played an NBA game. We were, as I said before, we were a year removed from losing 58 games. We didn't know, if you asked at the beginning of the season, could Jay Will, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins play in elite postseason competition? I couldn't have answered that question. I'm sure some of you could have, but I couldn't have. So, we're learning through the entire year. You know what I mean? And that, to me, I didn't want to really disrupt that learning process. I felt that we could still finish, and maybe be better than we were, because the team is continually get better. And in Gordon's defense, actually, I agree with him on a lot of that. We were really surging at that time, and it's hard to, I think, bring somebody in that, I think he used the phrase like when the train is moving or something like that, and that's accurate. Especially when we're asking him and other players to do some things that are maybe different than they have done in the past, especially if there's a role that's significantly different. So I just think it's something we have to be cognizant of, as we go forward, because we're really learning still so much about ourselves and the team. And the other thing is we were a different team in the second half, also just because of the development of our players. I mean, we're at the point where guys were getting better every 5 to 10 games. And Cason Wallace on a 10-game increment was really improving, and kind of you don't know where that's going to end up. And the beauty to me about where we are as a team is that type of evolution should continue. And the players, they play off of each other that way. Players will look different as their teammates develop into different styles of player. And we figure out how to best leverage their strengths. So I don't know that there's a way to accelerate that. I think you kind of have to be patient with it. And in this particular case, I think it worked relatively well. I'm not saying we'll always operate that way, but I thought it was the best thing. And obviously the future considerations of how that trade accomplished so many things for us. As I said, not only did we clear the roster spots to get 2 veteran guys onto the team, big guys onto the team, but we also cleared roster spots for the summer, and salary room too. So there's a lot of reasons for it. But I was pleased with the outcome.
Mark was Coach of the Year this year. What stands out most to you about the leap he took this season?
Well, I wouldn't limit it just to Mark. I think it's him and his entire coaching staff. I think we have a really good group of coaches led by Mark. I wouldn't say that there's a leap per se. I still contend that some of the best work and the most meaningful work that Mark and the coaches did was in his first year. When a lot of the things that we're leaning on now or bearing some fruit and some benefit now were really taking place or being laid down. So sometimes I think like your best coaching or your best stuff, right, it's happening before, it's really being recognized. But he's done a fabulous job, his coaching staff and all the different people that support the coaching staff, our medical group, our performance group, everyone that's involved in our player development village, so to speak. Everybody has played a part in that success, and the coaches have done an excellent job, I think, of maintaining an open mind, which I think is really hard to do as you encounter more success. But to me, that's the mark of a constant learner, and that's what we're, when we hired Mark, one of the things that we talked about was we want a continuous learner. We want somebody that is curious about the game, and you don't want that curiosity to start to dissipate as you're getting more success or accolades. I mean, that's when the fight really begins, to be honest with you, in my opinion. So I have to continue to create the best environment for our coaches and our staff and everybody to continue to maintain that approach. And, trying to look at things differently or staying open and not like white knuckling every moment can be an uncomfortable place to be in pro sports. But I also think it's a place we'd rather be than, with the mass collection. You know what I mean? The strength in numbers is in the middle there. So I think he's going to, continue to do a good job.
Just based on this team, how do you view this team's identity stylistically, and how might that change in the summer, or how much of that might remain the same?
I think it's a great question. The answer is, I'd say, in progress. I think that we found a formula this season that obviously worked to get us to be a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense, the most historic offense in Thunder history, the 4th best offense in the history of the league. And at the beginning of the year, we didn't know that was going to happen. 2 years ago, I think we were 28th in offense. Most of our offense, defense, and overall net numbers started, we were either in the back 20s, 2 years ago, middle of the pack last year, and now we're in the top 5. I mean, I can sit here and act like I'm unhappy with that, but I don't think you guys will buy that. Of course we're proud of the progress we've made over those 2 years. Like I said, without anything performative happening, really without a whole lot of different, we didn't really add a whole lot. I mean, that stuff just kind of has happened through continuity, exposure, player development, experimentation. That's how we've kind of stumbled onto some of these things. Even the defense and the rebounding, and we obviously are not a great rebounding team, but I'd rather be a really good defensive team than a great rebounding team. And that's not to say that we can't bring that up. We certainly can. But I also think in context, as I said, the last 35 games, we were 10th in the league, defensive rebounding, and that was with no real change in personnel. But we also are last I think second or third last in the league, giving up rebounds to smalls, to perimeter players. So, you also have to look at it in context that we're less than 1% away as a defensive rebounding team, percentage-wise, to the Clippers, to the Pacers, to the 76ers, where the Pacers were 0.002% away from their defensive rebounding numbers. And we're 1 rebound away per game from being 15th in the league. So you spread that over 82 games, we all remember the certain moments where we feel a certain way, and I'd agree with that. We can certainly bring that up. But I would like to try to do that without manipulating or bringing down what's really driving a top 5 defense. I think the other thing about the defense that we learned was we're second in the league in rim protection. We're second in the league behind Boston. We're ahead of Minnesota for stopping shots at the rim. Now, not to get too granular on this, but if you're making or creating a lot of misses at the rim, that's also a lot of rebounds at the rim, which is where most offensive rebounds are gobbled up and taken. And so because of a lot of our schemes and the schemes that have got us a top 5 defense, we are pulling over, and we have an elite rim protector in Holmgren. But cleaning up the mess after that, once those shots are missed and we're playing at that kind, that's where we're really open sometimes. And part of that's we got a small guy in that position on purpose because of the way we're trying to generate turnovers. And like I said before, it's a bit of an unorthodox formula to work for us. But to answer your question, like, we're not set in any way. I think our way is to maintain an open mind, to have a beginner's mindset about everything. We talked about that when we were losing 58 and 50-something games, and we weren't talking about that as a bridge to get to a place where we were a more respectable team. Those are really the way we think. And so, we're not trying to prove anybody wrong by being a bad rebounding team and trying to win. Like, we'd love to be great at everything, but we don't want to create a hole in one area, solve one area and create 3 holes in another area that we're scrambling to fix in another way. So we're just trying to find the best way to win. And I wouldn't say that we have found that, because our team is also going to change quite a bit just with the amount of development the players are going to undergo.
Is it safe to say, there's a thought that maybe if you get a big, because people look at rebound numbers and say, well, plug him in there, but you also look for a style of play that fits with what you want to do. Is there any truth to that in terms of just a certain kind of big that fits the way you want to play? Or whatever?
I think every team's looking at it that way, right? Well, here's another way to look at that, Myron. We played J. Will and Chet together for 2.5% of our possessions this year. Okay? And that was our choice. We chose to do that. And by doing that, we got a top 5 defense. So I wouldn't want to lose the outcome of a top 5 defense in the pursuit of, trying to find the next Wayne Embry. So we've got to continually work and try to improve all of these different areas, but not at the expense of what's kind of generating our success. Now, could that formula change over? Absolutely. It absolutely could change. But I think we have to be careful about taking something that has worked well for us, especially in season, taking something that is like generating the second best net rating in the league and thinking that we can just keep all the good parts and add to the, bring the floor up on something else. So, yeah, I mean, we're looking for the players that help us maintain our strengths and would raise the floor on our limitations. But we are doing that. We're like I said before, like, we're not trying to prove anybody wrong. But we are a work in progress because, it's an organic project. And it's still in its infancy, and we showed progress in the last 30 games of the year. And quite frankly, if you look at the postseason, the least surprising thing to me about the postseason was that we weren't a good rebounding team. It also was not surprising to me that we were a very, very, very good defensive team in the postseason. One of the better teams in the postseason. What was surprising to me in the postseason was that we dropped off significantly offensively. To me, that would be the surprise of the postseason. It's not, they're not rebounding the ball. Well, hadn't really been, a huge strength of the team. What has been a huge strength of the team in the regular season was our offense. We really struggled offensively in both series for the most part. So that's, and that's a learning process. When I say that with optimism, because this was our first attempt at postseason success with this iteration of the team. Right? This was our first attempt at postseason success with this iteration of the team. And to connect it to Joe's earlier question, that's the value of trusting the team through that. And then you get to see where the resistance is and where we are bumping our head a little bit. I think we can solve a lot of those things, but that exposure has been really, really helpful. But our defense held up, our offense struggled.
When you talk about that,
have you, as you've looked at that and you diagnosed those offensive struggles in the playoffs, it seemed to me you guys were getting shots that you would have liked to have gotten. But from your perspective, were you getting shots that you wanted offensively in the playoffs, or was it more a question of not getting the best stuff you could get?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of both things. I think, we demonstrated that we could play at a historically high level offensively. Like I said, it's our best offensive team in history here, and we've had some good ones. It also is the fourth best in the history of the league. But for a team that's as young as us to go out and now put that into practice against playoff teams, and especially when we got to the second round, like Dallas is a really good defensive team, that is going to make us better. We will be reaping the benefits of that. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think I'm not like causing, it's not a matter of like, geez, like what's the problem? It's, we got to be a little more intentional. I thought Dallas was a superior passing team in that series. And, and that's not because we weren't trying to, but like they have a little more experience against that level of resistance defensively. And I thought they were just a half a tick, it made it harder for us to get out to their players. But I think we're going to get better at that because we've seen this. We've seen this now. We also know what we're capable of. So to have the offensive struggle that we did in the postseason, like in whatever it would be, 4 out of 6 games in that one particular series, that happened like twice during the year, that we would have that kind of, but that's what's quirky about the playoffs. You play 82 games and you end up in these matchups, and it's kind of a coin flip in terms of how the teams match up, who's playing well, who's healthy. It's just a real coin flip in those situations. Like, you got to be prepared to endure those things. But in my opinion, we got so much out of that postseason. I felt like we got better every single. I wanted us to keep winning, not just to keep winning, but because if we kept winning, we kept getting better. Every shoot around, every practice, every film session. Remember now, you go back to where we were at the beginning of the year. Chet hadn't played a game. Dub had put together like a really good second half of the season, but he hadn't played 82 games at this kind of level. We still had so many things that were unknown about the team, and then to be able to get that kind of experience and exposure, that was fantastic. I thought the play-in the year before helped us. So we just have to make sure we don't lose sight of the things that the playoffs, forces you to do. You know what I'm saying, in the postseason. But I in no way am I disappointed with where we were in the postseason. I just thought that I think if we played a little longer, we would have made some shots. We would have figured it out a little bit. But that's a process that every team has to go through. Those are the necessary steps, and I'm proud of how we managed it. We were, that series was the point differential of that series was 0. And there was a couple things here or there, but I did feel like they're the superior passing team. They're also a little more experienced than we are, and I think we have the ability to be on that level. Regular season, I think you can win with the dribble. Postseason, I think you win with the pass. And then toward the end of the game, your best player's got to make the plays off the dribble, which we all know. But and we were. I think our intentions were good. We just hadn't seen that yet, and I think we'll get better with it.
You have a few extensions coming up the next 2 summers. Have a lot of money to deal with this off season. With the changes in the CBA, how much is financial flexibility going to be for you guys? Because they can get those extensions can get pretty expensive. Not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but they can't get up there.
Yeah. Well, I think first thing you got to think about is how do we get to this point in time? We got here by, I think, trying to be extremely thoughtful, trying to be disciplined, trying to operate kind of with like independent thinking about how to how to build the team from the ground up. And now we're in a position where we have some flexibility. As you said, we have some players under contract that we'll be able to have those conversations with that are still quite young. I really can't get into, I don't even know how the rules change so much. I don't even know what I can say on these things. But just I would just say, we have young players that we think are going to get better and are going to improve, over a long period of time that we'd love to have with us. As in terms of the actual finances, I think for us it's important to note one, I don't know what I can say here, but there appears to be a TV deal that could potentially get done. That would be extremely beneficial for our team. In the event expansion ever took place in the NBA, that would be extremely financially beneficial for our team. And we have a new arena, fortunately, coming to Oklahoma City, which is a big economic component to our entire apparatus. So those financial inputs, potential financial inputs, could be significant for us as the second smallest market in the league. So I feel really good about the health of the organization in that respect.
Sam, there was obviously so much joy with this team on the court, and after talking to all the guys during their end-of-season interviews, it was very clear that joy spilled out off the court as well, in the locker room, showing up to work every day. What was your perspective of the chemistry of this team?
Well, every team is so different. Like every team is so different. We've had some real fun, sidebars that have taken place over time. I mean, we have the barking this year. We did get Gordon to bark, so we have that going for us. And then we had, the Stash Brothers thing. We had that thing going. We had the Thunder U, thing going early on. Now, if you really want to feel old, one of the guys from Thunder U is not only graduated, but he's working for us now. Eric Maynor. So we've had some of these things. Every team's super different. It all comes from the players, the personality of the players. And we got a great group that way. They're joyful. They are optimistic. They're fun to be around. You don't have to lighten them up, which I think is good. We've had some teams in the past that we've had to kind of break the ice with occasionally. I'll give you a funny story on this. The statute of limitations is over here. It's really my own statute of limitations. So when we were in the I can't remember, we were playing San Antonio in the playoffs, and it was during this really weird time where the NBA was cracking down on the dress code, but they were also starting to promote the outfits. So it was they're calling us and threatening to fine us, but then the marketing team, their marketing team, was plastering pictures of Russell walking in. So, and they like to give us a hard time, I felt. So they called me the day of a game, playoff game in San Antonio. So it's either a second round or whatever, or Western Conference Finals. And they're like, you need to talk to Westbrook about what he's wearing. I go, it's the day of a playoff game. I go, he might have some chaps and a cowboy hat. I don't know what the guy's wearing, but he probably doesn't. We're on the road. We don't, I don't know, if he's got another. He's definitely not walking in sweatpants. I can tell you that. He may not play. So so I waited because they were really giving us a hard time about this, and we're going to fine you guys if he doesn't do this. And I thought it was kind of ridiculous. But so I called Ray Westbrook, his brother. I said, I need you to get me an outfit of Russell's. And so I dressed up in one of Russell's, a sleeveless hooded sweatshirt, leather pants, and a gold, like he had this, like it was like a gold lion medallion. Which when I picked it up, it was so cheap. I was like, Russ, you know, like this is, come on, man. Like I know what you make. You know, we don't have to. And so because the team was very tight and it was so serious, like it's a serious group. We had this was Adams, Derek Fisher, Durant, Westbrook, Ibaka. Like it's not a bowl of cherries in there every day. You know what I mean? And that's why that particular team was good. But I walked in wearing Russell's clothes and didn't really break character. And it was just like, guys, we got to talk about the dress code. And it was like the only way I could get to that topic at that time and not have it seem like, you know, it was going to be the straw that like just cracked the environment. You know what I mean? So every team is different. Like you wouldn't have to do that. I could walk in with Shai's clothes and they wouldn't even notice. They don't care. They don't care. You know what I mean? But you know, it's really hard to get Serge to laugh. And when we got him to laugh, I was like, okay, this is going okay. This is going okay. Yeah, I love watching the way that every team's different, and it doesn't matter to me what the dynamic is, as long as it's theirs and it puts them in the best position to perform at the highest level, you know. And our job is to try to create an environment where they can find that level, you know what I mean, to their best of their abilities, and usher along in certain places if it's getting a little too loose or, you know, a little too tight. But it comes from the guys, and we've got really joyful guys.
Any photo evidence of that out there?
I'm not going to mention that. I'm not going there.
You had your Boston Globe piece resurface online recently.
Yeah.
How did that kind of come to be, and was that like one of your earliest memories of when you realized that this is something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I assumed I was going to get this question. I think it's very evident that I was acting like a Twitter user, you know, in 1993. I was frequently wrong, but never in doubt. I had 100% confidence in my opinion with 10% of the information. And I was an expert with no expertise. And I should apologize to Chris Wallace, who was the GM at that time. And in all seriousness, you guys know I'm joking about that.
Did he remember you, Chris?
Chris, no. Well, I mean, I hope he wasn't reading the letters to the editor at that time. No, but Chris Wallace is amongst a long line of elder statesmen that have been so good to me over my career. I've been so lucky with that. When I first started, Donnie Walsh, unbelievable to me. Unbelievable. Rod Thorne was very good to me. Kevin O'Connor from the Jazz was a huge mentor of mine. Gentleman named Steve Yoder, he was a head coach of Ball State, sat next to me the first game I ever scouted, and it was a Kansas game at Baylor. And I'd never scouted the game before, and we're sitting right on the court. And it was a huge upset. In fact, Collison was playing in the game. I still tell him the story. And Kansas was like, great. Baylor wasn't very good. Baylor's going to beat them. And the place is going crazy. And Steve Yoder says to me, we got to get out of here. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Coach? I mean, I'm just like, my eyes are so wide. I'm so happy that I'm in the NBA. Someone's paying me to, like, you know, watch basketball. And he's like, we got to get out of here. They're going to storm the court. And he pulled me, and we walked out of there, and he was right. Boom, they came on the court and everything. So Steve Yoder saved my life. But so just a million people. Sam Schuler, who worked with me in San Antonio, was an unbelievable mentor for me. Wayne Embry, who I mentioned earlier, I could have signed him to solve the rebounding problem, you know. And the list goes on. Jerry West, you know, he tried to take my lunch money though. So a few different times when I got started in Seattle. but these people we're all like lucky that those people were around before us, and they were so good to me. So, with respect to what you're saying, Clemente, about the letter, like I think from what I understand, I knew about it. It was a book assignment. It was an assignment when I was in high school. Like I think it was 1993, so I must have been a sophomore. And I was not a great student in high school, so I'm sure I painfully did that, and somehow it got published. I think I wasn't part of the book that they did. I passed on that, but they must have researched it and found it. From what I understand, that's what they said. But it's like super humbling. You know what I mean? And then like to talk to Jason Kidd. He brought it up to me when we were before the series started because someone had asked him about it, and it was great because I remember he opened my eyes while I was watching college basketball, and some of the stuff he was doing. I think it was like kind of like Kuzi may have been doing stuff like that, but it was in black and white at that time, and it didn't connect me quite as much as like the guy that was doing it in real time and like getting offensive rebounds and like firing it to Lamont Murray in the corner from like 20 feet away off the rebound. I was like, boy, I didn't even know you could do that. Or just the speed up the floor he would take. He was a very good defender, and it just opened your eyes to like how the game can be played differently. And so, but yeah, there I was, like I said before, frequently wrong but never in doubt, and so I'm aware of that.
Sam, you mentioned the team being in progress. I just wondered what you thought of Josh's year you had, just both the on-court stuff, the off-court stuff,
yeah.
and where he fits into that progress.
Sure. So I think with him specifically, couple things. One, it was an up and down year. I think he would, I think, acknowledge that. He's 21. So 21-year-olds generally have up and down years. I think the thing that is really interesting about his path, and everyone's path is different. I think if you've been covering the team for any amount of time, you know that that's a big factor in the way that we think about things. No one has the same path, and like that's a big part of player development, in my opinion, is really trying to understand the history, the person, the circumstances in which they're coming into the league. He came into the league, as I said before, we were losing 58 games. So he got started quickly, and then as the team got better and better and better, like he's seen some resistance with some of that. But the thing about Giddey that I really respect is he is tough and he is clutch. Like he is tough and he is clutch. He has, been asked to change some things and adjust to different things, and he hasn't flinched one time. He's never come to my knowledge, never come to anyone and said, I need more of this, I need more of that. What about me? He's trying to figure out how to best help the team. And, he has to get better, but the team also has to get better. So part of the things that we're facing, with the cross-matching is, and let's, I think Mark may have said this, but just to be clear, like the cross-matching is an acknowledgement by the other team of their limitations to defend Holmgren. So the other team's limitations to defend Holmgren are what creates the cross-matching for us, which is a great thing because we have a player in Holmgren who is so unique that they're scheming against the youngest team in the league. And that's happened a lot for us. We've seen so many different schemes. The trapping on Shai, that gave us a lot of trouble against Dallas the first time we saw that. We got better at it. We've seen several different types of zones. I think we've got better at those. We've seen the cross-matching. We've seen, some half-court trapping. We've seen some different things that, because the team has progressed, we're getting to see, a sharper blade, so to speak. But with the cross-matching, Josh certainly has to, work on that. I think he's gotten better and better at it. And then also the more Chet is able to abuse and dominate those matchups, and also on the offensive board, if you're going to put a smaller player on him, I think that's going to make us a better team. Because I think that's the main thing, is we have to figure out how to be the best team, and not isolated to like individual players. But at 21 years old, he doesn't. He's stubborn. He's stubborn about. And when I say about stubborn, I mean that in a endearing way. He's confident. He in the way that I think a lot of people would like to see him capitulate. You know what I mean? And give in. And he's not doing that. He's not doing that. And that's something that I like about him. We got to channel it and keep working with it. But there's not a lot of 21-year-old guys playing on 57-win teams. And we have to continue to figure out how to lean into the things he does to help amplify our team. Because the idea is to take the thing, he does a couple things as a passer that are better than 95, 99% of the people in the NBA. How do we incorporate that in a way that helps our team? And so that's the bit of the puzzle. But as I said before, I'm not surprised that after 2 years ago losing 58 and this year winning 57, that we don't have all that figured out. Like, that's not really surprising to me. But you'd like to try to figure out how to leverage those things. And we think about the development of a few guys specifically. It took Shai 3 years to become the defender he is. Let's think about where Lou Dort was a couple years ago, right? There was a lot being talked about Lou's shot selection, decision making, not from anyone in this room, of course, but just in general. And Lou is maybe our best example of player development recently. And how that happened, it's through refinement. Lou Dort has become an exceptionally more valuable player by refining what he does. It's not always like expanding. Everybody thinks about expanding your game. He's actually brought that down. And a couple years ago, I introduced this idea of the mixing board, right? You can't have everybody turned up to 11, because if someone's turned to 11, you can't hear anybody else on the song. And so we have to figure out, Lou brought his volume down, and that probably allowed Dub some more possessions to explore and figure out who he's going to be. And Lou actually became more valuable. And so I think in the NBA, or in sports in general, we get obsessed with degree of difficulty. And as in what I do, I'm not impressed with degree of difficulty. I'm impressed with degree of simplicity. And you're really good if you can be extremely effective without it looking that hard. If we're having to make it look that hard, it's probably not sustainable, and there's probably other things we can be doing. And I think Lou has really, really embodied that. And I'm saying that to you, Joel, under the umbrella of, I think Giddey is on, he's going to be on that path, just like these other guys were. He's having to be much younger than those guys. But I think he's going to be a good player for those reasons. But it's not a snap thing. It's not something that he's got to improve. He knows that. We have to continue to find the way to leverage and lean into the things he does at a very, very high level, but not at the expense of the rest of the team either. And so that's because we're a work in progress very much. The team is going to change. In the first mountain, 2010 to 2011, 2012, the jumps that the players made in those periods of time were significant. And as they got better, the team looked different with each jump that the individuals made. And then you have to kind of figure out, how do you make it all work? But you can't be the team 5 years from now. You have to, and I'll say this probably again, like, we're on a journey with these players. We're on a journey with these players. And we're learning with them and learning about them and trying to support them through that period of time. It's not all going to be easy. When we were rebuilding the team, there was a lot of concerns about the amount of losing, even though it didn't turn out to be that much. It was a 2-year window, but I said, you can't bubble wrap people from adversity. People, when they get to a successful point in their career or their life or their job, they always look back and talk about what? All the adversity. But then we also can't shy away from the fact that when we run into adversity, or a player runs into a hard time, or we make a mistake, or something, we can't shrink. We have to see that as like, well, this is going to be something we'll look back on in time. And I think the team is going to go through plenty of adversity, but in order to get to be the team we ultimately want to be, we can't rush that.
So with that, like, how are you approaching, extension talks with Josh, and if his future is with his team, like, what does that role look like with everything that happens?
Well, I mean, kind of what I just said. Like, he's 21. He's part of a team that's had a lot of success. He certainly has things he's got to work on, like every player. The development process for some of our best players has been years long. And we have to continue to figure out the best ways to leverage some of the unique gifts that he has to help us win at a high level. So that is how I would look at his future. People would ask me, well, what about the fit? I was like, well, what, the fit last year, or the fit the year before, or the fit this year, or the fit next year? Because we're assuming with that question that the team will be frozen in time, and this will be the only version of the team, when the reality is the team is going to change significantly from, as I said before, continuity, the razor's edge of competition, and what the competition teaches us about us and how to adjust, from natural organic development, from outside addition, and from, like I said, the exposure that we're going to get with the games that we play. So I couldn't predict what the quote unquote the fit will be. I will tell you that it won't have to fit on this team, because that team is over. This team will look different next year, and the year after that, the year after that. And so, we'll sit down and have those conversations relative to his contract, when those are appropriate. But we also don't have to do anything right now either, right? Because he has, another year. But I'm super open-minded about all of our players and where I think they can get to.
You mentioned Josh on the court.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned Josh on the court, but obviously there were a lot of things off the court. You got a 21-year-old who's going through all of those questions, going on the road, getting booed, and this, at the same time being 21, dealing with the cross matchups. How, as an organization, was the process of walking him through all the different things he was going through this season?
Well, we try to support all of our guys as they're going through different things. Obviously, the personal thing, that's off to the side. That's a personal matter. I can't really get into that. But he made it. He showed up every day, and as I said before, like his ability to compartmentalize and show up in every situation. He's been pretty durable. I don't know the numbers, but I feel like he's played in like 98% of the games or something. But guys go through challenges. If we didn't think that the guys we have weren't resilient, well, we wouldn't draft them. So he's had to do some things, but I mean that's part of being a professional, and I think he's a significantly better player at the end of this season than he was at the end of last season. I don't think that's debatable. You know, he's definitely a more well-rounded player. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure he's a better, you know, his free throw numbers are up. I think his three-point shooting is up. Bottom line is we don't get out of the first round in the fashion we did without a lot of his play. And, you know, he's, like I said before, he's tough-minded and he's clutch. But he's young, and he's got a lot of things he's got to work on. But I've never seen anything from him that would indicate to me that he's not willing to do that, not willing to take accountability for things, or really consumed with like his personal, you know, agenda. I do think there's a big difference. We have some very ambitious guys. I think of Holmgren this way. You know, Chet is ambitious, but he doesn't have an agenda. And I think we have a lot of guys that are ambitious, but they don't have agenda. And like, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? I'd like to have that. You know, you want people that are ambitious, but you don't want them to have an agenda that is accompanying that. That could work in contrast with the teams. We talk at the beginning of the year, every year, about the silent forces of the NBA. Those are real. They're alive. You know, they're at your walls every day. You know, the NBA is very much churning from a league of competition to a league of envy. You know, and I think when envy is driving things versus competition, I think sometimes you get it, that can overwhelm people, and when that happens, it really screws your team up. And so we're trying to really work hard at keeping that top of mind, and our players have done the work. You know, at the beginning of the year, we talked about being a young team, but you can be young and you can be mature. So there's a difference between, you know, youth and maturity. And I think the guys have demonstrated a tremendous amount of maturity through the last couple years in terms of what they've prioritized, how they've managed the natural pulls. You know, and it will only get harder. As I said before, like, the playbook in the NBA is create divisiveness and division within the teams that are better than you. And, you know, we have to be able to withstand that. That's not changing. You know, I think that's unfortunately, that's kind of society today. You know, rather than hoist your own colors, you're looking to tear someone else's down. You know, and we have to be able to withstand that.
Thinking about team building, Shai, obviously MVP level player, is going to have a chance after this contract to be the first like $80 million a year player. Just what are your thoughts on that and how it pertains to team building?
Good for him. You know, it's a lot of money. He's earned that position. You know, several years ago, you know, when we traded Chris Paul and handed the ball off to him, we didn't know what would happen. You know, but he has seized the moment and the opportunity. I think that we had also talked at the beginning of the year. Someone asked me a question about Denver, like why has Denver been successful? Or I can't remember. They had just won, so a lot. You know, not my first rodeo. A lot of times when the team that wins or is winning, I get asked about those teams. Hopefully someone's asking one day about our team. There's other people. But I think the thing that's happened is in Denver and in other places that have long strings of success is this concept of mutual commitment. And I think you need to have a mutual commitment with your best players with respect to the Supermax. And again, I don't know what I can say. I hope I'm not breaking a rule, but if Shai earns something like that, we need to be in position to provide that, and not at the expense of the other players on the team as well, where it's, hey, because of that, we can't give you this, but or we can give you that, but we can't do any. The trust is, hey, we need you to be mutually committed to the Thunder, all in on the Thunder. You know, in sickness and in health. You know, like there's going to be some tough times, but if we're always some people at the first drop want to get off the ride. You know what I mean? And in Denver, that I think there has been a mutual commitment to get through some difficult periods of time, and they've stuck together. And you don't really hear a lot of noise about, you know, this person's fault or not enough this or not enough that. And I think Shai, you know, we have to provide that kind of mutual commitment, and if we expect that kind of like all-in mentality from him, and because ultimately, what we're really doing with these guys, as I said, we're on a journey with them collectively, but individually, we are on a path to try to explore their potential with them, to try to figure out how, you know, how to help them get where they want to go. And that's not a one-stop shop situation. There's going to be a lot of tough breaks in there, but it's remarkable that he's put himself in that position, considering where how unknown everything was at that time. We talked about the financial hypothetical financial inputs that could really help us in that situation. But you want your players achieving those things, and we have to be in position to support those things, but not at the expense of, you know, also having, you know, some other players that can continue to along the journey with him. I think the last thing on him that I want to say about him is, like, I think he's really proud of what he has built here. You know, he's been here. You're always going to sleep better in a house that you built. You know what I mean? You're always going to rest better in a house where you raise the beams. And I know he didn't technically start here, but I feel like his ascent, a big part of his ascent was, you know, born with handing him the ball without any promises, like either way. Just like, hey, we think you can do this. And he's taken it and run with it, as have a lot of the other guys that were part of our first team. And another thing about him is, like, I think he's proud of it, but I also think he doesn't have anyone in his ear telling him not to be proud of it. You know what I mean? I think he doesn't have anyone telling him not to be proud of what he's accomplishing. And that, I think, has really freed him up to be a better leader.
You obviously can't predict the future, but a lot of young teams, a lot of young players coming up in the NBA right now, and I don't know how much you believe in a championship window, but having an MVP level player, coach of the year, financial flexibility you have right now with those guys on cheaper contracts and those young teams and young players coming up, how much does that change your aggressiveness or possible aggressiveness that you may or may not have in the quote-unquote championship window?
I'd like to think we're always aggressive. I think some people may conflate action with aggressiveness. I actually think it's harder to be disciplined and trust your own people than it is to, like I said earlier, like, just go out and burn the boats, you know, to show everybody that you're being aggressive. And it's, in some cases, I think people might think it's aggressive to trust in what you're doing. But I also wouldn't say that we're bound to one thing or one way of doing anything. I think, you know, we've demonstrated over a long period of time that we'll make some pretty big decisions. The other thing is, there's a lot of things that we explore or we look at that no one knows about, that doesn't, you know, that may not line up. So we're certainly not, like, we're not shutting it down and, like, saying, hey, we're never gonna look at an outside edition. Of course we are. We do every year, but we put that through, like, a certain filter, decision-making filter, to kind of let us know, like, whether we think this is, like, a positive value decision or maybe something that it doesn't really line up and maybe it's just more optical. but we'll go as fast as we can, but as slow as we have to. So go ahead.
Just with that, you kind of touched on this preseason, just about the whole championship window thing, and talking about Denver really, but
Yeah.
Shai rejected that idea when he talked to us. I just wonder, like, when talking about Denver, you said that the mutual commitment, like when that is maybe severed, is when people get to talking about window and just throwing around that term. Are there circumstances that maybe transcend that mutual commitment?
I don't think there's really anything that goes beyond the trust and the commitment that a player like that and the organization have. So I don't know if I'm missing the question, but at the end of the day, the windows and the timelines, that is like that's like external stuff. I don't mean to say, like, I've never heard, no one talks about that inside of a team. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's I don't know how else to explain it. And I also think, Joel, like, it's also not like a very like an obvious thing. Like, all these things are very nuanced. So I'm sure there's a million ways in which I could get to yes to your answer, but you'd have to play out a million different scenarios to get to that. And the great, like, the people that I gave you that long list of people at the beginning that were so good to me in my early years. And I think if I asked all of them, like, if there's, like, gave them a situation or a potential team building question, I don't think they'd look at me ever and say, like, oh yeah, it's obvious. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think, like, this is the basketball in and of itself, just the game itself, is totally unknowable. If you go back and look at the top 10 teams the beginning of the season that everybody had ranked as who would be the best teams in the league, one of them are still playing. Boston. Right? One. I don't know that anybody had the 4 teams in the conference finals that they have in the conference finals. And that's why I'm saying it's never like an obvious answer. If it's obvious to you, then that to me means, like, you need to check your work, because as people, we're always looking to get to the answer we want as fast as we can and with as little effort as possible. That's how we are wired, right? So if you're getting to something, you're like, oh yeah, that's obvious, they need to do that. And I do that all the time because I'm a fan of other sports. But I have the benefit of working in sports. So, like, if I'm watching a football team, I'll be like, well, geez, I mean, they should just do that. And then I realize, wait a second, the closest I'm getting to the team is I'm watching it. I'm not, like, inside the team at all. I don't know what's going on the team. I don't know the dynamics. As I said before, 100% confidence, 10% of the information. And, it's a lot easier when you don't have all the info. But so to your answer, I'm sure there's a scenario in which my answer would be different, but all of these things are so nuanced. They're so layered. And that's why I put, like, the mutual commitment thing above all, because it's more flexible than making it this, like, a pass-fail or an up-down decision.
With this Dallas-Minnesota series, do you guys, like, take any solace with how close you guys were to forcing in Game 7 with Dallas? It was tied point differential-wise, and now they're up 3-0. Might be a dumb question, but just wanted to...
No, Joe, I'm not saying that. That would be an example, though, of, like, saying to ourselves, oh yeah, because they're not doing, or these teams, they're beating them, that means we're good. It's like...
Is it instructive at all, like, watching this series compared to how you all?
Yeah, I mean, always. I mean, it's always helpful, but I don't think it's as easy as looking at something and saying, well, because they did this and they did this against us, this means we're this. There's so much more involved in that. But here's what I would take from it. The West is exceptionally good. Since I've been doing this, and I do know, and one thing is very true, the longer I do this, the more I realize I don't know. Because you're seeing things that you thought played out one way and they play out totally different over time, you know? So I really realize how little I know the longer I do it. One thing I'm pretty confident is the West has been dominant for a very long time. And when I think about where we were, I can maybe getting my timelines mixed up a little bit, but like there was a period of time where in the West you had Garnett, Duncan, Kobe, Shaq, Pau Gasol, Steve Nash, and that whole crew of Amari and Kidd may have been in there. Yao Ming. I'm missing monsters. I know I'm missing some. Oh, Carmelo, Chauncey, Kenyon, like the Hall of Fame. You know, in the West. That's just the West. And you know, I'm fascinated. Like, I wonder if people will look back in time at this era of the West as it's unfolding now, and there'll be like that level of concentrated talent. So the big takeaway is these teams are really good. My other big takeaway is Dallas can really pass.
The West has been the better conference for so long. It's at this point it can't be random. I know some of it could be market based or ownership based. What's your theory of why the West has been dominant?
It's a similar thing. It's I don't have an answer for that. It's like an unknowable. It's an unknowable thing. Whatever the first thing jumps to my mind in it probably isn't the right answer. So I'd start with that's unpacking that. You know what I mean? Like, why is that wrong? But I don't know the answer to that. But it's hard to dispute it. You know, it's hard to dispute it. And that's not a knock on the other conference at all. The East is great, and the top of the East is always really good. There's just so many good players and so many good teams in the NBA right now. And I think a big part of that is because the cap spike in 16 really threw the equilibrium of the league off for like half a decade. We're now kind of coming out of that. Like, we're spitting the fumes out of, you know what I mean, the tailpipe of that particular engine. And we're getting to a point in time, I think a big part of this is Curry's influence on the game and how that has influenced. Curry should go into the Hall of Fame as a player and a contributor because he has changed youth basketball in a way that has made the influx of players coming into the NBA so much more prepared and skilled. The drafts are significantly better. And the parity of the league now is where I think it was heading before the spike. And that's a great thing for the league. That's a great thing for the league. People don't really know what's going to happen. Now, that wouldn't change the predictions because the predictions are always inaccurate at the beginning of the season. But that's why no one goes back and looks at them. You know what I mean? Because I think they're fun to do, but no one takes them seriously. Unless you get it right and then you take a bow and then, you know, you usually forget. When everyone's doing their predictions, they never think about how wrong they were before. You know, they just think about how right they're going to be now. You know, so I don't have an answer other than the West is really good.
One more league-wide question. What did you think the mid-season officiating change in the way the game was more physical?
There's several different angles to this to me, and it's not one thing that I think is important as a watch out. When it comes to officiating, I think you guys know, we've very rarely ever complained about officiating. I don't think we may have had like 1 or 2 fines ever in 16 years. So we don't really care how it's officiated. We just care that it's equally, like, fairly, distributed. So, you can't get over a 2-year period of time and have another team have 1,000 free throw differential. That's obviously, that's a problem. And if you're not interested in why that's a problem, then you're not interested in fixing the problem. But the way I would look at that, first I'd start with the schedule, okay? And this is less about officiating, more about several different layers of things that I think we need to be taking into consideration as a league. There was a huge push for the players to play more, right? Which I think is a good thing for the league. You know, the phrase was we're an 82-game league. We're not a big load managing team. But I also think it's a straw man argument to say that load management is about injury prevention. It's really about performance, you know, maximizing performance than it is injury prevention. So I think that's kind of a false argument on that. So the first half of the season, Stars are playing in 84% of the games. So it's a huge win. But they're also incentivized to play in those games because you got to get to 65 to get your money, to get your recognition. So it's a bit of a carrot system, right? After the All-Star break, that number dropped to 72%, which is one of the lowest numbers we've seen, I think, in the last 10 years. Then we get to the playoffs, and the Stars are playing in 85% of the games. Okay? That's the lowest, second lowest in the last 10 years. Well, part of it is the second half of the schedule this year, because of the in-season tournament, in my opinion, I don't think it's my opinion, I think it's the truth, was more compressed and had more back-to-backs, less days off than any non-COVID schedule since like 2015-16. So you've got players playing more for incentive, but in the back half of the schedule, there's like we had every team had a schedule like this, but we had 17 games in a month. We had 5 back-to-backs in that month because there's just no room in the schedule, and every team's going through that. So player participation, schedule compression, and then the free throw component or the foul component, the thing that changed. Whether we say that we changed the rules or we changed the way the rules were being enforced, there was a significant change. There was a bigger drop-off in fouls called than we've ever seen in the history of the league. So it wasn't a modification, right? It was a change, and that's fine. That's the rules of the game. That's what happened. But we went from 22.6 free throws a game per team to 19.8 after the break. Okay, that's 3 a game. Again, that's the biggest drop in free throws as far in the second half of the season, as far back as you can go data-wise. That 19.8, if we played a full season at that would be the lowest amount of free throws per team in history. So, for context, in the 90s, the average team shot 26.5 free throws per game. And that was in brawl ball, right? So the thing I think we need to just be cognizant of is, and it's not intentional, and I don't even think it's something to react to yet, but if we have the schedule this compressed because we have a longer All-Star break than we've ever had, we take Election Day, that day is removed, and we can't have any back-to-backs during the in-season, those games got to go somewhere. And we're not lengthening the season. So we have compressed schedule. Players are playing more because they have to, which is great, and I think it's a great thing. You can't bubble wrap guys. But then if the physicality is up that high, we have to ask ourselves whether or not, because I don't know that, like, we're managing the physicality versus calling the games. I think technically calling the fouls is more just managing the physicality at this point, which some people love it and it's great. I don't have a problem with it. I just think we need to watch those 3 components and the availability in the playoffs for the best players. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure the best players, that's the goal of the player participation policy, is to have the best players on the court more. I would say on the court more at the end of the year. And if these things are not working in concert, I think we just got to keep an eye on it. I wouldn't say it's a problem yet, but we have to kind of watch, the physicality build up and all the things we talked about. Because less than 20 free throws a game per team on average, like I said, that'd be the lowest in history. And I don't think the goal is to get free throws out of the game, because free throws are part of basketball. You know what I mean? If you're going to play, we had some games this year with no free throws. That's not a basketball game. You get free throws in a basketball game. So, we have to just figure out if all these things are trending to get the outcome we want, which is the best players on the court as much as possible and in a position to perform at their best. And so we just got to flag that.
Over the 4 years Mark has been head coach, you guys have been by far the least fined team in the NBA. I think last time I checked it was somewhere 70,000.
Except for when I get fined for what I just said. It's going to add to the tally. It's going to add to the tally.
I don't think you guys racked up $30,000 worth of fines in 2 months, but no team was under 220,000 in those 4 years. And then with team, you mentioned how Chet, the stuff with Chet, not these guys just don't get in each other's way, and I just want to know how tough is that to just build a team, and not just a team, just an organization where people don't get in each other's way, and everybody Mark cares, the way that Mark cares about the guys and tells them not to get onto the refs, they don't get technicals at all.
Yeah.
They don't foul hard, don't get flagrants. It's pretty much non-existent in this organization, and just really wondering how tough is that to build that part along with the closeness of the guys, because like I said, they don't get in each other's way, they care about each other's success.
Well, I think it's not something I can say is we can put in a box and say it's always going to be like that. We might end up, getting more fines or something like that. I don't know. It's certainly not our goal to we didn't go into the season saying let's not get fined. We just want to try to control the things that we can, to be adaptable and roll with the punches as much as we can. Like I said, with the midseason officiating, whether it's turning the dial up or turning the dial down, something changed. We can't control that. We got to play in it. I thought we did a great job of that. I actually think it helped us get ready for the playoffs. So I liked that part of it. I just think we need to be careful that all these other objectives don't get an unintended consequence. But yeah, whatever's thrown at us, we just want to try to be adaptable, control the things we can. We don't want to get in a position where we're always looking outward. And it comes down to the guys. You know what I mean? And we'll be challenged for sure, because we have, like I said earlier, we have really ambitious guys, and I love that. And that's going to challenge our culture at some point. It's going to be, but that's okay. It's all right. It's going to make it stronger in the long run. There'll be things that come up that we have to kind of address or try to modify or whatever. That's part of the growth of the players. We got to let them figure themselves out a little bit with a young team, in my opinion, and not try to put them in a box, so to speak. There's going to be times where you draw outside the lines a little bit. You kids, fine. Do you know what I mean? We might graduate to some of those things. Our goal is to try to create an environment where we're just kind of focused on ourselves. And we talk about stacking possessions. You want to stack possessions. You want to stack months. I mean, I said beginning of the year, we hadn't played more than 1 month of really good basketball. We got to stack months this year. We didn't have a month where we were under a 4.4 net rating. The year before, we had 3 or 4 months where we were under 0. So to me, that's major progress, right? That's what we were looking for. but we want to stack seasons. And we want to look back over a period of time at a canon of seasons and see what's the identity. What do we have? To Joel's question earlier, I don't know that we can answer what the identity is right now. Over a period of time, we'll be able to answer that. The mentality of, it's not novel, but like controlling what's in our control. How do we respond to things versus react to things? Can you have a uniform approach or mindset to try to maintain our emotions during that period of time? That's what we're trying to embed early if we can, and we might get the raw end of it sometimes because we're not throwing our hands up in the air or but I just think on the long run it will best serve us.
I guess how do you form an environment that allows guys to be consistent from year to year? Like the Shai that you got years ago might not have been the Shai that you got now. Like that's still now.
I wish I could give you an answer to that. Like, it's not like we have some. We don't have there's. I don't think there's a manual or like anything like that. A lot of trial and error, a lot of self-reflection. I think just some of the things we talk about all the time, I think helps create that. But it comes down to the guys, like we're all here to support the players. The players are what make it all happen. Like I don't have a job if there's not 450 incredible, amazing athletes that have come from all over the world, from various circumstances to compete and get to themselves to a point in time where they have a chair in a locker room in the NBA. That's never lost on me because I certainly didn't have that opportunity. It's about the guys and how do we best help them achieve their potential and get what they want out of it. And hopefully what they want out of it is to win. But that's hard because you have to make choices as a player, as a young player, what your priorities are. And as I said, holding off a lot of the wolves at the door because, as I said earlier, the league sometimes shifts more to envy than competition. And when that starts to permeate someone, that's a really hard thing to fight off, and then your decisions are different. So we try our best to understand the guys and give them the best environment for them to sort that out. But we're not controlling that. I wish I could say we were.
What are you looking to add player-wise, draft-wise, player acquisition? I know you're 12th, but you found data of those guys. Right?
Yeah. When it comes to the draft, we're looking for the best fits for us. And that's always been kind of our mindset. We're going to pass on some players. They could go on to have great careers elsewhere. We may not think that they could have the same type of impact or career here for one reason or another. We generally gravitate to a certain type of player and person. I'd probably say person and player. A lot of it's wanting to be a part of what it is that we're working toward and seeing if they can find self-satisfaction out of being a part of that. That's a big baseline part of it. We don't have like a specific. We're not like looking for something specific as like a on-court need or something like that. Good players are really hard to find, like super hard to find. Guys that can play consistently in the NBA and be in the NBA for more than 3 years, that's actually harder than it sounds. So I like the draft. I think it's pretty good. I think every one of these is so different. One thing we know historically is that there's good players in there, and they never go in order. So someone's going to come out of the second round is going to have a huge impact. Someone's going to be picked in the 20s. there's like a 3% chance. Like a 3% chance or something you get like a top starter or really good player in the 20s, an all NBA player in the 20s. Like that's really, really hard to do, but it happens, you know? So they're in there, but a big part of that, Myron, is you observe the players, then you evaluate them to decide, and then you have to onboard them, and then you have to develop and work with them, try to understand where they're going and how to get there. And that's different for every player in every organization. And sometimes it could be a really good player, but the potential, the fit, or just not as much symmetry there for whatever reason. And so guys go on to find success maybe somewhere else, you know. But the players are there. It's just, can you line up with somebody and figure out a way to help them reach their potential with you? And sometimes it's not that easy.
What's Uzi in his involved?
Who's that?
Uzma, Jay. Where's his?
I think the last couple months of the Blue season were huge for him. Playing in those types of games, carrying that kind of responsibility. He also, he cranked it up developmentally during the postseason for us, where he was, we flipped the summer program and got it going early because we thought he's going to be potentially playing for the national team. So we needed to get as much done with him as possible. But I was very pleased with how he ended the season. I was very pleased with how he ended the season. Like every young player, he has so many things to work on. When we drafted him, he was like almost like a year young for that draft. So, we kind of knew that his timeline and his pathway would maybe be different, certainly from Dub, because Dub was coming in as somebody that we felt like he could get on the court sooner. But Oos has responded pretty well, and I'm pleased with him. I think he's made some big strides here.
Sam, following up on Shai's ascension you mentioned earlier, like from the outside looking in, it feels like there's some other factors just off the court of like his mentality, his growth as a leader. In a league as talented as it is today, what separates a star from a franchise star like Shai?
I don't know, because I don't know. One person's franchise star could be somebody. I would just say he's the right guy for us, and I don't know how to categorize that other than, as I said before, he's a secure player. He's a guy that sees himself clearly, sees his himself, and not just, looking around at others. He's got an extremely consistent mentality and work ethic. He's got an great equilibrium as a person. And he's extremely bright. And I think his views on competition and improvement are really sophisticated, and I love talking to him about that. And I learn a lot from him when we talk about those things. But he's also like a colossal competitor, and that's a great combination.
Are you able to comment on the TV deal, the upcoming TV deal?
I don't want to touch that other than, hopefully everyone gets what they'd want, but I can't really talk about it.
Sam, you did say you would expand on Gordon later on. I want to ask you to do that and just maybe explain where you saw the disconnect and what you thought of his exit interview generally.
Yeah, I know some of the things he said, but I didn't watch it, and I've never read a transcript or anything like that, and I have no problem with anything. Whatever he's saying, it's fine. As I said, I think it was a bit of a tough situation. You know what I mean? To go from always starting to coming to a team that was starting to surge quite a bit, that has a different way of playing, and just wasn't able to get going quite to the level that I think he wanted to. He helped us get to the number 1 seed. He was in the rotation. He had some nights where he had to start. I think he did help our rebounding quite a bit. He was totally focused on doing what the team asked him to do. So I don't have any knocks on him in that way at all. But it was instructive to me. The reason why I think I was mentioning that is instructive to me in that adding someone mid-season like that with our play style, with where the team was and how well the team was playing, trying to do that without taking away from the things that were working in such a strong direction, knowing that we didn't have 3, 4, 5 years of that under our belt. This was our first year where we were playing consecutive months of good basketball. That was a bit of a challenge. Every one of these things is different. So I that's a lot of that's on me, at the end of the day. But I liked how we ended up, because like I said before, we were not. We weren't first in the West at the time, and I'm not saying it was because of that particular transaction, but it was also probably because we didn't do other things. You know what I'm saying? But that's how to look at it. And as I said, it was a multi-dimensional thing for us too, because it's one of those rare trades where when you're usually acquiring a player at the trade deadline like that, you're usually not getting great value, right? Because you're giving things up for immediate. It's just natural, right? Just how it works. I actually think that it worked pretty well for us where, we were able to consolidate, like I said before. We opened up salary room, roster room, got those guys into other situations where I thought they could play more than they would with us, which those guys did a great job there. I miss watching Bertans' shooting workouts. They were amazing. I mean, just amazing. He'd get in here, by himself and just some coaches, and just the professionalism and the accuracy is just really something, to watch him. It's great. I love watching. I never gets old for me watching these guys do what they do because they're so gifted and they're so talented. And the guys that really work at it have my ultimate respect, especially when you're not playing. Very impressive. But it was a multiple dimension trade for us. There was one like that a long time ago. I felt would work like that too. Was when we traded Serge for Victor and Sabonis, and I felt that would have made that particular team, if it stayed together, extraordinarily difficult to beat. And if Kevin were to leave, I still felt like we were going to be good with those particular players under team control going forward versus Serge going to a free agent year. So it's very rare in the league that you can get to the point where a trade fits those parameters. I thought the Hayward trade did that for us. I would have loved to work out better for Gordon, but that's just how it goes.
With that, like you mentioned, the trade was multi-dimensional. You didn't die on him fitting or not fitting, but did you foresee that he would be maybe unhappy or that he wouldn't be able to properly fit in time? And then how did that maybe change the way you acquire people mid-season moving forward?
That's what I'm saying, is that I missed on that. That's on me. But I'm learning. I'm trying to learn this team. I'm trying to learn the pace of the team a little bit. I'm just trying to be a great observer of the team as it's going through these paces, knowing that it's really going to change on its own in and of itself. Our team, the last 20 games was significantly different than the first 20 games. This is the same players. You know what I mean? But significantly different. And every time someone changes or develops or we stumble onto something, it changes the rest of the team and how they can perform. And so it's I think it's pretty nuanced, and texturized, but I don't think I read that one perfect, and I'm learning from that in terms of bringing somebody mid-season and especially early on in the process for our team.
You kind of hit on these points here and there, but what do you think about the the new changes in the NBA, the in-season tournament, 65-game rule, Jaylen Brown rule, just all those different things implemented this year.
I'm all for, I understand the importance of the players being as available as possible, and is very supportive of that. There probably did need to be some correction on that. There's no question about that. In-season tournament, I've been a big proponent of that. Again, like the leagues that really asked us to get behind that, and we're trying to be good partners as much as we can. I just think flagging, when you have so many new things that you're implementing, I just think we got to look and see how they're colliding with each other, and if they're actually giving us what we ultimately want, which is as many players playing at the right time. But I think the league's in a great place. Adam's just a miraculous visionary for the business, and thinking about where we were as a league 10 years ago and the things that we're doing now, I think it's great. We also need to be not sanctimonious about the game, but I do think we have to make sure that we protect the game, because that's what people really come to watch, is the competition. And you want it to be recognizable, you know what I'm saying, and not, I just think that's an important thing. Not that we're on the bad path with that, but I think that's like the North Star at the end of the day, is it has to be something that people can connect to, and we're building all kinds of new fans. Like, there may be people that don't like the in-season tournament because it's different, and that generally is what happens when you put something that's different in front of people. They generally don't like it right away. But there's probably a 10-year-old kid who just started liking the NBA. He thinks the in-season tournament's it's just part of the deal. You know what I mean? Maybe they get excited about it. But yeah, I'm all for all the different things. I just want to protect the players. I think that's the main thing. We were really over here on player health and wellness, and I feel like we could end up over here, with a lot of these new objectives. One thing I think should happen is we should have the medical arm of the NBA office, Dr. John D. Fiore and David Weiss. They should have final approval on the schedule. They should have input on the schedule, because they have conducted all these studies on load management and have a very clear idea of who should be playing and when they should be playing. And I think that if they should be very involved with the schedule making, so they can stamp it and say, yes, like these are suitable. People shouldn't be calling us and saying they need to rest players for whatever reason. I just think getting them involved in the schedule would be a huge win, and would I think take some of the bemoaning and criticism from the teams away. If you already had the medical folks say, yeah, this is suitable for NBA athletes. I just think it would be extremely innovative to do that, and we're the most innovative league. So why are we holding back from getting them more involved in being a part of the scheduling?
What's the rule? What's the logic behind the second challenge if you lose your timeout, you get it right?
I used to be on the competition committee, but I rolled off. So I'm not really totally sure on all the debate on that, but most all the decisions are based on game length. People don't want the game getting longer. They want it getting shorter. And I'm all for that, but again, it's still basketball. Like, you can't personally, baseball is 9 innings. It takes 9 innings to play. Some people like it, some people don't like it. If you don't like it, you probably don't watch it, or you probably don't go. There's fouls in basketball. We can't just take everything out that makes the game longer just because it makes the game longer. You could start losing the game. But the challenges are awesome. They're great. The people that I think deserve the most credit on the challenges are the refs. Because to go to the monitor and see something that you missed, and now it's still a judgment call. So you can find a lot of ways to talk yourself into, no, this was wrong, this was right, I made the right call. But I think more than half of these get overturned and get deemed correct. Maybe more than that, I don't know. But the refs have a really hard job, because they're just administering the rules that the NBA makes. They don't make the rules. They have to enforce the rules. And so the challenges or a new thing, it obviously helps accuracy. I give them all the credit in the world because that's a hard thing to do, is go look at that right away. And the best of the best, you know, they're not wrong that often. You know what I mean? But they're administering what they're told to administer. And I think sometimes people have the impression that, like, the officials are making up the rule. They are not. They're handed the rules and said, this is what we want. And the competition committee is a part of that as well.
It just seems strange you lose your timeout, though, when you correct a mistake they made. You still lose the timeout.
Again, timeouts and fouls make the game longer. And so they're trying to reduce those.
Earlier you cited something about the strides you guys took as a defensive rebounding team post All-Star break. To get to where you guys want to be ultimately as a rebounding team, do you think that can be achieved through internal development with the guys you have, or is that more of like talent acquisition?
Well, we can't guarantee talent acquisition because there are certainly players that we would love to have that I think would really help our team. The other teams are not willing to just give us those players. So unless we can improve ourselves internally, which somehow we were improved in the second half of the season, not enough. Like, we weren't able to do that for the full year. But I think it probably has to be a combination, but also like the maturity of the team also will help that. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of what the goal is, which is to have the best defense. So if we were really good at rebounding, had a top 5 defense, but we're really bad at getting turnovers, I don't think anybody would care about that. You know what I mean? I don't think they'd care. But because the thing that we're not good at is something that's unorthodox, it's easy to look at us and go, well, other teams have this or look this way. That's the problem. It kind of opens us up, you know what I mean? Because it's a unique formula. We get that, but we can't like go door to door explaining to everybody why we're doing this or why we're doing that. Someone once said, we can't spend all day, this is Ralph Waldo Emerson said, you can't spend all day in explanation. Like, sometimes we just got to like do the thing that we that we think is working for the time being. We're not married to just doing it that way, but the schemes this year helped us get a ton of turnovers, force a lot of tough shots, second in the league in rim protection. That is going to create a lot of rebounds at the rim. You know, we could do a better job there, but we're also turning the teams over quite a bit. But we'd love to get better at everything. And we're not like trying to prove anybody wrong by being a bad rebounding team and being good. You know, we're trying to just be good. And if there's another way to do that, we're open to that. We're not resisting that. And that could be an outside acquisition. But, you know, we're going to look at all those channels.
Just when you think about the op-eds you wrote 5 years ago, like when you think back to that, what do you remember about your headspace back then and how it maybe compares to now?
Well, the thing I think about with that, Joel, is, and I think I've said this to people here before, but I was writing that kind of letter while we were in the midst of trading Westbrook. So I was talking to Daryl Morey, and we were negotiating, and I was talking to Russell because that was the place he wanted to go, and I was trying to land the plane there the best that I could. And in between, I was trying to capture kind of my thoughts on what was potentially ahead, you know? So the process of that is what I really think back on. But a lot of those things are still very alive to me. You know, the things that we're talking about or we're saying, I think if you went back and looked at those, you know, the words, I'm probably saying, I have strains of whatever I'm saying today is very much connected to a lot of the things we're talking about. And not in terms of like, well, no one knew where we would end up in any way, shape, or form, but the principles are still the way we're operating. Those weren't principles to get through a period of time. Those are principles to kind of live by. And so that's how I reflect on that.
You ever go back and read that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, not often, but occasionally I'll go back and look at it, because I think sometimes in everything that we do, sometimes you can get away from, your tent poles or your pillars, so to speak. It's good to pressure test that occasionally, I think. And so I'll read it for those purposes. Like, are we staying true to that? Because the intentions are not to, when you go through a period of time that's difficult, not to have a bridge over that period of time, and then all of a sudden just start conforming to what is deemed acceptable after that. Like, okay, we did that. We don't have to use these tools anymore. We don't have to think this way anymore. Now we can think like everybody else. It's more kind of like, this is a path we're on, and it's really there's a highway that doesn't really have it's just kind of going. We're just kind of on it, trying to learn as much as we can, trying to use these principles as best as we can. That's kind of how I've looked at that.
If you think about Chet just playing his first full season, you mentioned earlier Jalen, J-Dub, sort of having, kind of an up and down rookie year, but more of a consistent second year. As you think about their off season, what are your expectations of those two guys, and things they'll work on, and what you're thinking you'll see out of those two?
Well, first thing is, I love them both. They Dub, to me, the thing about Dub I love the most, he's not a numbers guy. Dub is not a numbers guy. Dub, if there's one thing I could say to him, it would be yourself. Be who you are. He's a unique guy. He has traveled a different path. I want him to just make sure he maintains that. What makes him different to me is the motor. Two-way player with he's extremely talented, but he's got a great motor. Plays both sides of the ball. And he's driven, and I think he's going to come back a better player. I think the playoffs were fantastic for those guys, because they had to feel some weight in those moments, and I thought Game 4, I'm horrible at this, but Game 4 and Game 6 on the road, those were great showings. We didn't get the outcome that we wanted in the series, but to perform and have you have to execute under duress like that, really impressive. He's coming. Chet, as I said, the thing about Chet is he's extremely ambitious, but he doesn't have an agenda. And we just have to continue to, as I said with Giddey, lean into what it is that Chet has, where he can go, and figure out how to continue to grow that within the framework of the team. Because the one thing about Holmgren is he's a colossal competitor, and he's extremely ambitious. But when he gets on the court, it's winning time. He doesn't let that get in the way of what the team needs, and that's what I think could make him such a special player. As talented as he is, he never lets his ambition override his teamness, and it's impressive.
As you're talking about that, is there a moment or an instance that is flashing in your mind that illustrates just what you're talking about with Chet?
Well, one thing I'd say about him is you can coach him in the games. I noticed that. Again, I'm really just trying to observe this thing. I'm trying to learn as much about the guys and the team. I don't have a fixed idea of what it is or what it's going to be. And that's hard, because I love to fast forward and imagine, but like, I think we really just try to study it and just kind of watch it happen to a degree. But like, I did notice, like, he'll make a mistake, or he might like do something that's out of character or something, and Mark can really jump him, and Holmgren responds to that. Because I think he knows. I think that's part of what makes him great. You know what I mean? He's like, he knows and he wants to do right. So I have so much respect for his, when we were scouting him, I watched him a lot in high school, right? A ton of high school. But I went to watch Gonzaga practice because here's this big name recruit, clearly going to go high in the draft. It was later in the season, and they were it was at University of San Diego, and I just wanted to see him interact because that was some older players on that Gonzaga team, and they, as I said before, when you hoist the colors yourself, and when you put up the beams, you have more ownership and you sleep better at night. Chet was new to that. Gonzaga, he was extending Gonzaga. You know what I mean? But they have been good, And I was like, how is he going to handle this? And I just wanted to say, I knew the player was not the issue. But he interacted with those guys like he was the 15th guy. And he took direction. He was coachable. He asked questions. He did all the, every one of these college programs has these traditions that, they've done for a long time in there. And I'm like, sometimes guys won't do that stuff. And I was like, is he going to go through he did all that stuff. He was one of the guys. And like, that goes back to that kind of stuff, if he maintains that, and I think he will, because I just think that's how he is. I think that's how his parents are. Like, I just think that's part of what makes him a special player. Like I said before, we're second in the league in rim protection. I don't think a lot of people knew that. But like, that's because that guy's coming, he's answering the bell all the time. He's a tremendous shot tracer, not just shot blocker. But I noticed that early at USA Basketball. And he's playing against Mobley. And he didn't block all those shots, but he was tracing those shots. Like, his hand was right next to it all the time, no fouling. And so he's got some really great gifts. I just wouldn't want to cap him because there's a lot there.
He had a great rookie year, but his rookie year was very different. Chad, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
His rookie year was very different because he had an entire year before he even played.
Absolutely.
As a part of the organization.
Absolutely.
How beneficial do you think that was?
Invaluable. I think it was invaluable. When it happened, we have enough experience here with when the sky, I say the sky falls on every team 3 times a year, and that certainly felt like that. But one of the things that you get rewarded with is persistence in this industry, in my opinion, and not seeing that as a forecast in a negative light, but an opportunity. How are we going to use this to make it a positive? And we dove right into that. Chet was amazing with that. And I think he learned a lot about the cadence of the season. He obviously worked on his body. But there's no substitute to actually playing. But I do think that there's some real benefit to that. And then we had to kind of work into the season by we had a pretty good year last year. We went from, like I said, 30th in offense and defense to 15th. So we were doing better. We could have just kind of tried to fit him into what we were doing to try to white knuckle the success that we had, the moderate success that we had. But we had to be, again, open to what could be, to what are the possibilities if we were to take kind of first principles. How should we approach this? What should we do? Even just playing him at the 5 as much as we did, we had to see that. We didn't know it was going to result in a top 5 offense. You know what I mean? And we didn't know that it could have fallen flat on our face, but there were some positives in that. We had to work through that, and I think that's a real positive thing that Mark and the coaches were able to do. It wasn't a given. We had to be willing to fail if that wasn't going to work. And if it didn't work, we'd adapt and we'd adjust, But that year prepared us, I think. We had success, but we needed to have success with him. And how was that going to look? And now we've got him in a good spot, but as I said, team's going to change. And so we're going to have to keep curating. We're going to have to keep curating the team to a degree as these players continue to develop.
Cason Wallace's year, and just were there any moments in scouting him or the draft process that stood out to you that made you think that he could be a contributor right away?
I can never tell you if they're going to play right away or anything like that. I wish I had the ability to do that. I never know that. I always say Sabonis was the guy. I didn't know he would play as much as he did his first year. I always think about that. So I would never place like limitations on someone like, oh, they're not going to play or they will play. It's like, well, what's the team? Like, where are we? How kind of summer are they having leading up? But Cason's a no agenda player. He has no agenda. He's making the play that's in front of him. So much is made of like quote unquote like make a play. Cason is serving the game. There's a big difference to me between someone that can make a play and a person that can serve the game. He's serving the game. He's making a decision, the right decision as to how the game is unfolding without really any thinking. Some people are thinking, should I pass that? Because if I do, he might not get an assist. He's just passing to the right person because the game is telling him. He's serving the game that way. If the game is, and the thing that I like about him that really stuck out was all the difficult things that are hard to do as a basketball player. Physically, he did those eyes wide open. He did not, he's not closing his eyes getting over the screen. Like his job is to block out a guy that's, 8 inches taller than him. He's driving into that guy's thigh. That's the job. So he's doing it. So there was no moments of indecision. So he's a very clear mind of how to play because he's trying to win. And that's the thing that stuck out to me with him.
I know you spent time with Jerry Krause in the final once he was alive.
Yeah.
Just leading up to, his death, I think the way he was painted was that he was sort of this lonely but prideful scout that he even inquired about other minds, leading up to, the time he died, that he was just so into the scouting thing, even leading up to that point.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you, ever since that you carry that same feeling, that endless chase, and if it maybe has boundaries, anything like that?
No, I mean, I love watching players. It's how I started. I told you that story about watching Kansas with Coach Yoder. I love watching players. I love watching the development of players. I love watching players achieve their goals. I'm fascinated by basketball in general, but also just by these guys that are so good at it, because it's just them and the ball, man. You don't have to be so good, to get a shot off in the NBA, and I'm just have a lot of admiration for the sacrifices that these guys make. They keep the lights on here with these sacrifices they make, and we can say they've got charter jets and they've got all these amenities, and they do, but they've earned it. Their effort has earned it. I like watching players, and then the reason why is because you never know. You can work at it and try to go back and look at all the ones that I know. I'm like, I completely botched that. I missed that. How did I not figure, how did I miss that? Because so much of it is really random, and we've got a great group of evaluators, and we have since I've had the benefit of being here. Like, we've had great evaluators. Every one of them has had had a hand in like the decisions that were made, you know. And they're the unsung guys. They're the guys that are, you know, gassing up the rental car at 5 a.m. in Des Moines so that they can get on a 6:30 flight to, you know, a town and then drive another 2 hours, and then the guy that they're supposed to go see gets in foul trouble and doesn't play like for like 18 minutes of the first half. It's like, you know, but I've been there. I've been there, so you know, I know what that's like. But those guys really grind it, and I mean, those guys make huge sacrifices being away from their families and stuff like that. But Krause, the thing that he was another one of those guys. Mitch Kupchak's another one of those guys. Now that I think about it, he would just be like, when you see something that you think is pretty special, you really get that feeling of like, wow, that guy might be able to do it at the highest level, because it's not like most players are exhibiting that all the time, except for the ones that are extremely loud that everybody, you know, knows. But I like that part of it. But I like doing it with our evaluators. So I like to listen to what they think, and just because I learn from them all the time, you know, because they're watching it 24 hours a day, you know. But I love to listen to all their opinions, and who's really passionate about an opinion matters to me. And then most of all, when somebody realizes that they may not have a great handle on the guy, when they'll be like, you know what, I need to watch more. Like, let me watch more. Like, that's a great sign of a good forecaster. I hate to like go to the greatest hits here, but like there's two types of forecasters: those that don't know, and those that know they don't know. And that's what makes a good scout. It's like we're all guessing. It's not like we know. It's, you know, it's so random to think that you've got like an edge on that. Nah, it's the players and what kind of competitors they are and workers, and then obviously all the different people that touch the players. But it's not like a thing that anyone's better at than anyone else. I really, really believe that.
With those moments that Jerry described to you.
Yeah, the electric moments.
The electric
Yeah.
moments. Just